How is energy policy set in Michigan?
The governor, kind of lays out their
Mhm,
kind of energy policy framework that is then passed to the legislature,
mhm.
who creates energy law. And they often direct the Public Service Commission, who is directly regulating the utilities, to kind of set out the rules that utilities have to follow.
Welcome to the Commonwealth. Lively and informative conversations with changemakers and thought leaders, from grassroots leaders to policymakers, about what's actually working to build fair, thriving urban communities in Detroit and beyond. I'm your host, Dana Thompson. I think you'll find today's conversation engaging and timely. I'm speaking with Tony Reames, a professor at the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability and a presidential appointee in the Biden Harris administration. We're also speaking with Mary Braun, the Green Projects Director at the North End Woodward Community Coalition. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having
me.
us.
Absolutely. So, Mary, you are the Green Projects Director at the North End Woodward Community Coalition. Tell me about your role.
Yeah, thanks. So, NEWCC, as we affectionately call it, is a small social justice community based organization. We serve the North End neighborhood of Detroit, Highland Park, and Hamtramck, and we work on building equitable systems. My role is mainly focused on the environmental and energy related projects that NEWCC implements. We have outdoor science centers paired with pollinator habitats that we're implementing to help both reduce flooding through green stormwater infrastructure, as well as to educate residents about what they can do at home to reduce flooding. We have bike repair stations that we install throughout our service area to encourage the use of alternative transportation, Wi-Fi enabled solar charging stations that we install. Basically, a solar panel with a small battery on a pole that folks can plug in their devices to charge when the grid goes down. And then the big initiative that we're working on right now is our Community Energy Alliance, which we'll talk more about later. But it's basically our take on community-based solar.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Tony, you have a career that's been focused on environmental and energy justice at the university as well as in government. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the Seas Clinic at the university as well as your research projects that you are working on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dana. And I love the stories that Mary talked about in UCC. We're gonna have to connect after
Yes.
this for sure. So when I returned back to the university in 2024, I took over a fairly new initiative that the School for Environment and Sustainability launched in 2021 called the Seas Sustainability Clinic in Detroit. It was a recognition that the school and their colleagues and students had a lot of projects focused on sustainability and climate in the city, but they weren't coordinated. And so the clinic was launched as a way to both create that hub as well as think about new projects and how we could do deeper long term engagement. And so we were funded by the Kresge Foundation. It was right after the large flood. So one of the core projects was working with Jefferson East and the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood to focus on flooding resilience, particularly from a planning perspective. We have a space in downtown Detroit now,
Wonderful.
so an actual clinic that people can come to.
Right.
And we work with organizations across the city as well as city government on all things environmental justice. We also do circular economy. And so we have a lot of folks that are interested in composting and material reuse.
Mhm.
And so those are kind of our focus areas.
Wonderful. Tony, this question is for you. We hear about renewable energy and alternative energy, and sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. Can you explain what those terms mean and how they're
Yeah.
different?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about how I got into this space. So I'm not an energy professional in energy. I came at it from kind of a policy and community organizing perspective while I was working on a degree in public administration in Kansas City. I started this work during the economic recession of 08, 09. And so there was money in the Economic Recovery Act for purchasing lots to deal with stormwater. And so people could buy a lot next to them, build a rain garden, get some support for that. So I started out doing interviews on if people wanted to build rain gardens.
Oh.
Everybody kept talking about their energy. And they kept saying, I heard there was money from Obama for
Okay.
energy. And so,
Okay.
so I went to my advisor and I was like, there's something about energy. And I found all these scholars in the UK that were writing about fuel poverty,
Okay.
which is
Oh,
this concept of the inability to afford your energy bill, paying more than 10% of your income on energy. And so that kind of started me on this trajectory to kind of understand access to energy, understand energy affordability. And so I started it from the energy efficiency perspective, which
okay.
is when we think about our fossil based economy, and so that is coal and natural gas,
Okay.
we now know that that really impacts our climate, right?
Mm.
The impact of burning fossil fuels has this great impact on global warming and all these other issues that come from that. And so when we talk about alternative energy, some of it is renewable, some of it is not.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so alternative sources are things like nuclear, which have less of a carbon impact
Okay.
on our climate. Biomass, so things like dung or waste from wastewater treatment plants.
Okay.
Um, but then there are the renewable sources like wind, solar, geothermal. And so I guess an easy way to think about renewable energy is something that can be replenished daily. But our fossil fuels like coal and natural gas were created thousands and thousands of years ago, and
Okay.
those resources are finite. And so they will run out, and they
Okay.
also have an environmental impact.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And so there is still some impact on the environment with renewable and alternative energy sources, but not the same.
Not the same climate impact, yeah. So we have these other environmental issues that we must address,
Right.
which sometimes are kinda left out of the conversation.
Okay.
But when we're trying to address our greenhouse gas reductions,
Mm-hmm.
these alternative and renewable sources are viewed as better.
Okay. So, Mary, in terms of energy burden, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it definitely relates to what Tony was saying. Essentially, when we talk about energy burden, we're talking about the percentage of a household's income that they spend on energy costs, so electricity, heating, and cooling. Typically, at least from what I've seen, if a household's percentage is above 6%, they're considered energy burden. So with, disinvested urban communities like the ones that NEWCC serves, they already have limited income, right? And so they're
Yeah.
already making hard choices about how to spend their money. Am I going to pay my electricity bill
Mm.
or am I going to buy my medicine? That sort of thing. And the households that we serve in our census tracts have energy burdens from 6% to 12%. So,
Okay. Wow.
even the households that are doing quote unquote well are
Right.
still considered energy burdened.
So, why are communities of color disproportionately impacted by rising energy costs?
There's a statistic called the Energy and Security Measure. So the Department of Energy does a household energy consumption survey,
Okay.
residential energy consumption survey, REX,
Okay.
every 4 to 5 years. And so in 2015, it highlighted that 1 in 3 American households face some type of energy insecurity, whether that's the inability to pay their monthly bill, keeping their home at an unhealthy temperature, too hot or too cold, or making a choice between paying their bill and some of the other costs that Mary brought up. Sometimes we call that heat or eat. People choosing
Yeah.
between heating their homes or buying food. And so that survey was done again in 2020. We saw similar stats that, a little reduction because we had some moratoria for shutoffs during the pandemic.
Okay.
So it was about 1 in 4 households because some people were like, well, my utility's not shutting me off, so I can still afford it. But as soon as those were over, those numbers went up again. Um, And so one of the challenges that we find in communities of color, housing quality, and so that relates back to housing consumption, redlining. So those issues still persist and cause people to live in poor quality housing. A lot of renters,
Okay.
and so people are unable to make choices to improve the efficiency of their
Okay.
homes.
Okay.
And then rising rates. I mean, we have to address that, right?
Yes.
Even as people try to do things to make their homes more efficient,
Mm.
reduce consumption by cutting back, they can't keep up with the way that rates are rising. And so what you see is that households of color, low income households, senior households, people on fixed incomes are really struggling when it comes to affording their energy bills
And we're seeing rising rates across the country.
across the country.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's not just an issue here in Michigan. I
Mhm.
was just in South Carolina last week speaking to public service commissioners there who
Mm.
are the ones that vote on the rates that utilities set or approve the rates that they request. And they were calling out, like, yeah, what do we do to, stop the rise of rates? But we're also building new infrastructure, right?
Right.
And so it
Right.
costs money to do that. And I think folks are learning more about energy rates.
Okay.
Um, it's a equity perspective, right?
Mm.
Because we all share in the cost of our energy infrastructure,
Right.
but a dollar for one customer is not the same as a dollar for another if they're struggling to pay that dollar, right? And so what I am optimistic about is that more people are talking about it in ways that I haven't seen in the decade and a half that I've been doing this work.
Are people advocating for lower income communities to pay different rates or lower rates, paying rates at different levels? Is that something that advocates are pushing for?
Yeah, so there's a lot of movement, both here in the U.S. and across the globe on percentage of income payments.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
people are
Okay.
thinking about if 6% is considered kind of the affordable energy burden, um, could we have policies in place or plans in place at the utility level where a person pays 6% or less? That may also mean that higher income folks are paying a higher proportion of their income.
Right.
Um, haven't seen a lot of programs that have shifted additional burden to higher income,
Okay.
but we have seen some pilots in Illinois and some other states in the Midwest and Great Lakes that have tried, and on the East Coast that have tried percentage of income payments. So the jury is still out on
Okay.
if those work, if people are still able to afford, because the challenge is people aren't increasing their income, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, as rates continue to rise, incomes are not keeping up. So that's why energy efficiency and renewable energy could also support that because you kind of reduce the consumption and hopefully bring the cost down. When I was at Department of Energy, because we had the Justice 40 initiative,
Mm.
a big part of that effort was to ensure that 40% of the benefits of our clean energy investments went to disadvantaged communities. And so
Mhm.
some of the programs like grid repair, grid
Mhm.
modernization,
Mhm.
ensuring that that would occur in disadvantaged communities. We did see an effort to address some of these disparities that have been recognized for years.
Mhm. So, speaking of solutions, NEWCC is involved in a lot of important work that's providing solar to communities that you serve. Can you talk about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So, NewCC is working to establish what we are calling a community energy alliance. It's through our Solar Neighbors program. And essentially, the alliance is framed as a self sustaining trust that is community owned and community operated. So we have modeled ourselves after the community land trusts. New CC, as the founding organization, runs the day to day operations of the alliance, but it has its own governing board that is made up of community members.
Mhm.
And the board um, basically makes decisions about how the funds in the trust are utilized and operated. The funds in the trust are used to install solar on trusted community hubs like churches, nonprofits, local businesses that are well known throughout the community. And then the hub leases the electricity or leases the infrastructure um, from the Community Energy Alliance.
Okay.
And then the alliance basically uses the proceeds from those lease agreements to and reinvest them into the community, either through direct payments to households. We can't give them credit on their utility bills, but we can cut them a check that can help pay for a percentage of their utility bill.
Hmm.
Our long-term goal is to have the trust rolling over enough income that we can actually install solar on individual households, right? So that we have this sort of distributed network of solar that is truly owned and operated by the community and perpetually owned by the community,
Okay.
so that the revenue, the income, the benefits never leave the community.
So is this a new type of structure, this community solar trust?
Community solar is not a new idea. The traditional model of community solar, as NEWCC has understood it, is that it's still very unattainable for a lot of folks in the communities that we serve. For the traditional community solar model, you have to buy a share in that solar, right?
Okay.
So even if you're not getting the solar on your household, you don't have to own a home to get solar. You don't have to pay for the system up front, but you still have to buy a share. For households who can't even pay their rent and buy food, that's not an option, right? And the other thing is that a lot of community solar projects are still owned by utilities, right? And so they're still subject to the same rising rates that we see constantly from the IOUs. And so even if you have a share in a traditional community solar project, you're not guaranteed that your rates aren't still going to go up, right? When the utility decides to raise the rate. So this model that we are developing, and still working out a lot of kinks in, to be honest. It cuts out that need for upfront funds from the households, and it provides a layer of protection against the increasing utility rates.
Okay. You are initially starting with a church site?
Yes.
Okay.
Our pilot site is Prayer Temple of Love Cathedral in Highland Park.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that project, how that's gone, and and then when you think you might get to residential?
Yeah, so I just want to give a shout out to Pastor Rick from Prayer Temple of Love. He has been the most patient man in the world, who has stuck with us, who agreed to come with us on this journey to be our pilot site. We initially got funding for this pilot site through the Community Power Accelerator Prize. That was in 2023, I think. And so it's now 2026, and there's still not solar on the site. But we've done a lot of work that we didn't know we would have to do going into it. The church itself is very old. So rooftop was not an option. We knew that we didn't have the funds to replace the roof in addition to getting solar on it. There's a lot that adjoins the church that's perfect for a ground mount system. But the lot's not owned by the church, or was not owned by the church, right? And so the way it works in Michigan, you can't have solar at one address providing energy to a facility on a different address. So we found the landowner of that lot. He owed a ton of back taxes to the city. So we made an agreement with him that he would sell us the lot for
Mhm.
$1 if we
Mhm.
paid all of his back taxes.
Okay.
So NEWCC fronted the money and now has an agreement with the church where
Mhm.
they are slowly paying us back for that land. So now we have the parcel. Then we had to go to the city council to get the lots joined,
Okay.
which sounds like it should be straightforward. It was not. I think it was
Mm.
7, 8 months later. We finally got the lots joined.
Okay.
So we signed a contract with the solar company in March of last year of
Mm.
2025. They came out to do a site visit in June. Um, they came up with a design for us, submitted it to DTE for the interconnection agreement. DTE came back and said basically the electrical infrastructure at the site is out of date,
Oh,
completely outdated. You're
okay.
going to need to dump $40,000 to upgrade the electrical infrastructure.
Mm.
So we are now at the stage where we have an electrician working with the DT planner to identify exactly what electrical upgrades we need to do in order to get it up to code so that they will approve the interconnection agreement, and then we can move forward with getting solar on the site.
Have you seen these projects happen nationally?
Yeah, so Mary just pointed out one of the major issues with what we try to call the just energy transition. So this idea that when you asked earlier about alternative energy, renewable energy,
Right.
um, we know the literature tells us and reality tells us that people with access to that type of energy have higher incomes, live in wider communities.
Okay.
And so one of the challenges in urban communities, rural communities with lower incomes is that we haven't upgraded the infrastructure to be able to accept or connect to these new energy technologies that are better for the environment,
Right.
better for people's wallets. And so when you try to do these projects, you find out, oh, we need to upgrade the substation, or we need to upgrade the wiring, or we need some other type of infrastructure to be built in that community
Right.
for it to take solar or take wind or take geothermal. Um, and so some of the money in the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed by Congress in 2001, again, was grid modernization dollars, and trying to use the Justice 40 initiative to ensure that that money went to communities who needed the upgrades most,
Right.
was a big part of that rollout. But we also recognize that the need is so great. So much of our energy infrastructure um, is outdated, has been under maintained, and we just haven't made that investment. We've built a lot of new infrastructure, but that's primarily been for our suburban expansion,
Right.
and not going back to like our older communities, more urban communities. And so a lot of times when people ask this question about, well, why are our rates going up if we're saying we're paying for infrastructure? It's really because we're building new infrastructure.
Right.
We don't really pay a lot for upgrading infrastructure.
Okay.
Now, I think
Okay.
here in Michigan,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
particularly with the duration of outages, the increase in outages, the Public Service Commission has enforced that utilities actually do these infrastructure upgrades. And so we're seeing a lot more resources go into infrastructure upgrade in urban communities.
Okay.
Um, but again, we're also paying that cost, right, as ratepayers. And so now we're paying for new infrastructure that's being built
Yes.
for something like data centers,
Right.
in addition to infrastructure upgrades in communities that are experiencing outages. And so the more we learn about, you know, why we pay the rates we do,
Right.
I think will allow us to have a fuller conversation about the overall energy grid
Yeah.
in ways that, again, we haven't before.
So who are the policymakers that need to know about this in order to
Yeah.
make sure that money is being
Yeah.
spent for these changes?
It's so interesting. I think one of my kind of naive moments of being at the U.S. Department of Energy was that I thought we were setting federal energy policy.
Right.
But there are 52 individual agencies that um, regulate and govern our energy system because it's done at the state level. And
That's
so
right.
these public
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
commissions, public utility commissions, or, in other states, they have different names. And so trying to get all of them to agree on kind of like what the national standards should be for our grid is one thing. But they're responding to the needs of their own states, the utilities in their states. And so when we think about the policymakers that we're trying to influence or, highlight issues with, it's at the state level.
Okay.
Your local government may support in some of the kind of policies that make it easier to do the things that Mary was talking about, like, combine two lots so you
Right.
can build solar on a lot. But it's really these public utility, public service commissions who are in some states appointed, in some states they're elected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of advocacy now around educating people on this very powerful body that most people never think about.
That's right.
It's been like a passion project of mine over the last 5 to 6 years to like really get people to think about that commission. Here in Michigan, we have
Yep.
3 commissioners.
Right.
They're appointed by the governor
Okay.
with kind of offsetting terms. And
Mhm.
so you never have like a whole new commission, but they're so powerful. So powerful.
Absolutely. So then how is energy policy set in Michigan?
The governor, kind of lays out their kind of energy policy framework that is then passed to the legislature, who creates energy law, energy policy.
Right.
And they often direct the Public Service Commission, who is directly regulating the utilities, to kind of set out the rules that utilities have to follow.
Okay.
And so what you'll see from advocates is sometimes they're pushing the governor to, think about climate or think about energy access, energy policy. The legislature is also thinking about that because the governor has to sign bills. They kind of, collaborate and negotiate on that.
Right.
And then it's up to the commission to then take those laws and actually say, okay, utility company, this is how much renewable energy you need to have on your grid.
Okay.
And so say if the governor wants 50% renewables by 2030, the legislator may tinker with that a little bit and say, we'll go to 2035.
Okay.
The regulators ask the utility company to come up with a plan to meet that, and they track and monitor that over time.
And in Michigan, has there been a push from the governor to move to renewable energy?
Yeah,
or
so
renewable energy.
yeah, so we're on a plan for 2035.
Okay.
We have the My Healthy Climate Plan,
Okay.
which kind of lays out how all industries across all sectors will actually reduce their carbon emissions. And what you see is that many of our utility companies were closing all of their coal plants. We currently have a coal plant in consumers' territory that the federal government has required them to keep open,
Okay. Huh.
which is really interesting because I've heard some estimates that keeping that plant open is costing ratepayers in consumers' territory $2,000 extra a year.
Wow.
Because they'd already planned to shut it down,
Okay.
and now we have to pay to keep it open.
Wow.
And so it just shows just again, as we're trying to work to reduce energy burdens through things like solar and energy efficiency, there's still these other external factors that influence rates.
Yes,
So that's
absolutely.
really where we need to address energy burden.
Has NEWCC been involved at all on the advocacy?
Technically, as a 501(c)(3), we have some pretty, what I think are strict guidelines on what we can do,
That's
right,
right.
in terms of advocacy. This past year, we have done a fair amount of engaging with the legislature and the MPSC. We had a grant through the Solar for All program that was rescinded. And so we had the opportunity to go to Lansing and testify before the Senate committee on energy about that and how that had impacted our communities. And then we also had the chance to talk to the attorney general,
Mm.
before she joined the lawsuit,
Okay.
as well. We've had several conversations with the Michigan Public Service Commission.
Mm.
I think something Tony kind of alluded to is when, the legislature kind of sets these laws and the MPSC enacts them,
Mhm.
there's a lot of times there's like gray areas, right?
Mhm.
Where it's if it's not explicitly stated in the
Mhm.
law,
Mhm.
how the MPSC interprets it might be different than so we've talked to them about, well, our reading of this is maybe a little different than
Mhm.
than your
Mhm.
reading of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
I wouldn't call it advocacy, but conversations,
That's right.
engagement, education, understanding.
Yes, and as a tax-exempt organization, you're very limited in terms of the lobbying that you're able to
Right.
do, but, education is definitely allowed and necessary. And you talked about the Solar for All grant that you lost. So how much was that for, and how did that impact the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it was called the Solar for Savings here in Michigan, My
Okay.
Solar for Savings.
Mhm.
And we hadn't actually officially signed a contract, but we were slated to get just under $1 million. And definitely slowed things down. Our plan with that money was to put solar on 2 additional hub sites. We were gonna get them new windows, get them newer roofs,
Okay.
do insulation so that it wasn't just solar, but it was
Mhm.
the whole facility, right,
Right.
was healthy. For the households that we were gonna help with that, it was gonna
Yeah.
be 50 plus households that we were planning to
Mm.
give 30% of their electricity bills. That's devastating,
Right,
and I
right.
mean, we hadn't lined up the households yet. We,
Okay.
had never made promises to any individual.
Mhm.
But to think about the loss at
Mm.
that level
Right.
um, is devastating.
And those 50 households were in Highland Park,
Yeah,
North
so the
End.
the additional 2 hub sites, were also houses of worship in Highland Park, and
Okay.
so our, the target households would have been directly surrounding, um, neighborhoods.
Okay. So how can people get involved in NEWCC's work and in the work that the Seas Clinic is doing?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you've got $1 million to donate, feel free.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but for folks who live in North End, Hamtramck, and Highland Park, um, reach out to us on our website, and we are always looking for folks who are interested in being guinea pigs for our solar initiatives. We're looking for folks who want bike stations in their neighborhoods. I know we've focused a lot on the renewable energy um, in this conversation, but we have our pollinator habitats. We're looking to install 4 more throughout Highland Park, and we we need residents to want those, and we
Right.
we don't we don't want to just come in and say we're doing this and the city said it's okay. So if you have a space in your neighborhood that you think would be good for one, let us know. We also have our equitable internet initiative, which is completely separate from
Mhm.
the environmental stuff, but we provide free internet to households, and if you need internet, there's go to our website and there's a place to sign up for it. We don't ask for a ton of information. If you say you need it, we believe you. So, let us know.
So, Mary, please share the website so people know how they can reach out to you.
Absolutely. It's NEWCC, NEWCC.org.
So, what about your work? How
Yeah.
can people get more involved?
Yeah, there are a ton of
Engaged?
ways to engage with the sustainability clinic as well as me and my research because I view myself as a community engaged scholar. But I'll, address the clinic first. We have office hours that people could reach out to us, sign up for office hours. So NGOs that are either trying to get into the sustainability and climate space or have a sustainability or climate issue that they would love support on, um, they can reach out to us at seas.umich.edu/clinic.
Okay.
Um, we also have something we call the Sustainability Help Desk, which is like real time support, where folks can reach out to us through the website, and it has our phone number on it, and you can call and get, kind of like a geek squad at um, to just answer any question that you might have that we can answer kind of on the fly. And then another opportunity is called sustainability assistance, and that's where we provide um, graduate student support. One graduate student up to 100 hours of support from that student to help with a specific project or help you do some research. Um, and so, trying to offer kind of those three resources, come to our office hours, calling our phone number, or getting a sustainability assistant student. Um, and then for my research, I'm always looking for community organizations that have data, that want data analyzed, are thinking about data they want to collect. And so we could create a research project together, um, really trying to either identify energy inequities, disparities, or evaluate projects or programs that communities are trying to do to measure the impact of those projects. So I'm always open to, yeah, finding new partners, finding new clients for the clinic. Um, and then we're also trying to bring people together, right? I
Right.
think, learning about NEWCC,
Yeah.
there are other organizations that are doing similar work or can
Mhm.
learn from them or they can learn from. And so the clinic is also a space for kind of shared experiences. Because I think that was one of my takeaways from being in the federal government is that when I could review applications that were coming from all across the country, I
Mhm.
was like, wow, this group in Virginia has a very similar idea to a group in Washington, right?
Right.
And,
That's right.
they're miles away, don't know about each other. And so if we can do that here in Detroit, I think that'll make us much more aligned on our sustainability and climate efforts.
Well, hopefully this connection here
Yes.
between the two of you is fruitful. Thank you both so much for this conversation. This has made us smarter about renewable energy and the impacts on disadvantaged communities. And I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and wisdom and all of the wonderful work that you're doing with our audience. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having
Yeah,
us.
thank you for the opportunity.